Good morning, students of St. Joseph School. Today we're going to talk about the first lesson in the second unit, properties of sound wave. In this lesson, we will study many subjects to show the properties of sound waves. Too many subjects, such as the nature of sound waves, properties of sound waves, sound pitch, sound intensity, the factors affecting the sound intensity, like sound quality, types of sound waves. Let's start with the first one, the nature of sound waves. What are the sound waves? Sound is an external stimulus, external effect, that affects the ear and causes hearing. Sound is produced due to the vibration of the bodies, and it stops as the bodies stop vibrating, like this picture. If you vibrate the strings in the guitar, it will start producing sound. The nature of sound waves. Sound propagates in different media in the form of spheres, where the center of these spheres is the sound source. Sound velocity. It's the distance which is covered by the sound waves in 1 second. And nearly the sound travels in air in a velocity of 300 meters per second. And the sound velocity can be calculated by using the wave's propagation law, the one that we took in the previous lesson. If you need to calculate the velocity, it equals frequency times the wavelength. Sound waves are mechanical longitudinal waves that consist of compressions and rarefactions. Properties of sound waves. We can hear many and different sounds, and these sounds may be pleasing to our ears, such as music, or a source of disturbance and irritation, such as horns and loudspeakers. It can be source of fear, such as the sound of strong winds and thunder. These sounds can be classified into two groups. We can classify all of these sounds into two main groups. Maybe they are musical tones, like the sounds of violin, like the piano, or maybe it's noise, like the car horns, like the sound loudspeakers. The musical tones. They are tones of uniform frequency and comfortable to be heard, like the violin, the piano, and the reed pipe. They can be also noise. It's a sound of non-uniform frequency and uncomfortable to be heard, like the drill, the loudspeakers, and horns of cars. Real-life application, the earplugs. Earplugs made of silicone are sold in pharmacies. They take the shape of the external ear canal, where these plugs are used to avoid the hazards of noise in the loud places. The human ear can differentiate between the sounds that reach it through three different factors: the sound pitch, the sound intensity, and the sound quality. It means you can differentiate between different kinds of sounds: sounds of man and sound of woman, sound of your friend. We can differentiate between the different sounds by using these three factors. Now let's talk about them. First, the sound pitch. It's a property of sound by which the ear can distinguish between the harsh and sharp voices. Harsh, it means rough. Due to the sound pitch, we can differentiate between the low-pitched sound of a lion and high-pitched sound of a sparrow. We can also distinguish between the harsh voice of man, which is low-pitched sound, and the sharp voice of woman, which is high-pitched sound. And I think you can notice that the frequency of the sound of man is low, but the frequency of the sound of woman is high. As we can see here. Here, the wave has low frequency and long wavelength, but this one, it has high frequency and low wavelength. Note, as the sharpness of voice increases, the level of voice gets higher. The level of the voice is expressed by the sound pitch. Sound pitch depends on the frequency of the sound source, as we mentioned before, where the sharpness of sound increases as the frequency increases. By increasing the sharpness of sound, the frequency increases, and the harshness of sound increases as the frequency decreases. So we can conclude that there is a direct relation between frequency and sound pitch. To illustrate the concept of sound pitch and its relation with the sound frequency, let's do the following experiment. 1. Tie the rubber string around the book and put the 2 pencils below it as shown. Number 2. Press on the string by the forefinger of the left hand at 10 centimeters from one of the 2 pencils. Then move this part of the string by forefinger of the right hand. Like if you are playing on a guitar. The sound becomes more harsher as the length of the string increases, and it's more sharp as the length of the string decreases. As the length of the string decreases, the number of vibrations produced in 1 second increases. As the length increases, the number of vibrations also increase. So the frequency increases. And when the frequency increases, the sound becomes sharper. That's why the guitar player always change the position of his fingers on the string. Finally, we can conclude that the sound pitch is a property of sound by which the ear can distinguish between the harsh and sharp voices. The sound pitch depends on the frequency of the sound source. It depends mainly on the frequency of sound source. And we can see here in this figure that we have a direct relation between the sound pitch and the frequency. If the frequency increases, it means the sound pitch increases. It means that the sound level becomes higher. How can we calculate the sound pitch by using a device called Savart's wheel? As we can see here, Savart's wheel, it consists of this part, this wheel, that we can rotate it by using this hand grip. And also we have many gears, and each gear has a number of teeth, as we can see. We're going to put this metallic plate in the gear, in the toothed gear, and start to rotate this hand. And let's listen to the frequency produced by this sound. We can increase or decrease the rotation speed till we hear a sound similar to that of the unknown tone. Let me remind you that the goal, the aim of this Savart's wheel is to calculate the frequency of an unknown tone. Finally, we can calculate the number of cycles taking place in a specific time. And also we know the number of teeth in So we can determine the frequency of the tone by the following relation. Frequency equals the number of cycles that you do using the wheel, the number of teeth of the gear divided by time. Or we can write it in another shape. We can write it like that. Frequency times time equals the number of cycles times the number of teeth. And we can use this form to solve the problems that come on this part. Now let's talk about the sound intensity, the second factor that we can use to distinguish between different sounds. Sound intensity, it's the property by which we can distinguish between the strong and weak sounds. The intensity of sound at a certain point is measured by the amount of sound energy falling perpendicular to a unit area in 1 second. And the measuring unit of sound intensity is watt per meter squared. Also, we can use the decibel scale. Decibel is the measuring unit of noise intensity. So we have a difference between the sound intensity measuring unit and the noise intensity measuring unit. Watt per meter square is the measuring unit of sound intensity, but decibel is the measuring unit of noise intensity. What are the factors that can change the sound intensity, make the sound strong or weak? 1. The distance between the source of sound and the ear. And we have here a relation called the inverse square law, which means sound intensity is at a point is inversely proportional to square of the distance between the source of sound and that point, which means the sound intensity decreases gradually as the distance between the sound source and the ear increases. Number 2, the amplitude of the sound source. If we do the following experiment, we can fix a ruler with your right hand on a table. We can use a plastic ruler or we can use a metallic one, and pull its other end with your left hand. It means let it vibrate as the picture. We can hear a sound due to the vibration of the ruler. As the amplitude of the ruler decreases, what does it mean? The amplitude of the ruler. Amplitude of the ruler, it means the outer part out of the table. If you decrease this part, the sound intensity gets weaker gradually. But if you increase this part, the amount or the part of the ruler which gets out of the table, if you increase this part, the sound intensity becomes stronger, from which we can conclude that there is a direct relation between square of the amplitude of the source and the sound intensity. Number 3. The area of the vibrating surface is the third factor that affects on the sound intensity. Here we can see that there is a mobile phone which is put on a wooden box. This wooden box is empty from inside. From inside there is air. If this mobile phone vibrates, you can hear the sound of this vibration very strong. So, if your cell phone vibrates in your hand, you can hear a weak sound of the vibration. But if you let this phone vibrates on a resonance box, this empty box, opened at one of its sides, you will hear a strong sound, which means it has high intensity. Number 3, let's complete the area of vibrating surface. Maybe you can ask yourself why the guitar or the lute, it has a wooden empty box from the outside. This empty wooden box. It's made to increase the sound intensity, to make the sound intensity higher. The fourth factor is called the medium density. Let's put an alarm clock under a glass jar connected to a vacuum pump. This vacuum pump, it is something to use to evacuate the air from the glass jar. You can hear its ring clearly, but if we start to pump the air out from the glass jar, the sound gets weaker gradually until it stops. So it means that the sound intensity increases as the density of the medium through which the sound travels increases, and vice versa. If the sound intensity is going to decrease, if the medium through which the sound travels also decreases. Fifth factor is called the air direction or the wind direction. When the wind direction is the same as that of the wave propagation, it means you are talking or making sound in the same direction of the wind. Sound intensity increases, while the intensity decreases when the wind is flowing in the opposite direction. Here is the direction of sound, and here is the direction of wind, so the sound intensity will increase. But on the other side, the direction of wind is opposite to the sound propagation, so the sound intensity will decrease. Third factor is called the sound quality. It's the property by which the ear can distinguish between different sounds according to the nature of the source, even if they were of the same pitch and same intensity. We can understand that by using the following shape. This is called a tuning fork. The tuning fork produces a pure and simple tone, known as the fundamental tone, and we can see here it's so simple. But the violin and piano, they produce something called a complex tones. Complex tone is composed of the fundamental tone associated by other tones. These other tones are higher in sound pitch and lower in intensity. So, if you hear the sound of violin or you hear the sound of piano, you can distinguish between the two sounds even if you cannot see the source of sound. This is because of the complex tones, or mainly because of the associated tones to the main tones, which is called the harmonic tones. Harmonic tones are higher in sound pitch and lower in intensity. So we can classify this. We have something called simple tone and something called complex tone. This complex tone, it has two types. It's a mix of the simple tones and the harmonic tones. The harmonic tones are always higher in sound pitch and they have lower intensity. These harmonic tones are the main reason by which we can distinguish between the different sounds even if they have the same intensity and the same sound pitch. Types of sound waves. Sound waves can be classified according to the frequency into three types. One, the sonic waves. These sonic waves, they have a frequency ranges between 20 Hz to 20 kHz. 20 kilohertz means 20,000 hertz. These type of waves can be heard by human ears. The second type is called infrasonic, and these infrasonic waves, they have a frequency less than 20 hertz, such as the sound of storms preceding rainfall. And these kind or types of waves, they can be heard by some animals only. The human cannot hear this type of sound waves. Also, we have a third type, which is called the ultrasonic waves. The ultrasonic waves, they have a frequency more than 20 kHz, more than 20,000, such as that produced by sonar devices or some animals like the bat, like the dolphins. Also, the human ear cannot hear this kind of waves, so the human ears can only hear the sonic waves. Infrasonic and ultrasonic cannot be heard by the sound by the human ears. Some uses of the ultrasonic waves. We can use them in some medical uses, like breaking down the kidney and ureter stones, like the diagnosis of male prostate gland tumors. Also, it can be used in some industrial uses, like sterilizing food, water, and milk, because they kill bacteria. They have some military uses, like discovering the landmines. And this will be everything for this lesson. Thank you.